In the spring of 1965, the 1st United States Army combat troops were committed to the conflict raging in South Vietnam.
There was no point in my living life elsewhere, so this was the place to start. And if it was intended for me to die, I was quite willing to die because I had thought of suicide quite a bit and written about it, entertained it, and fantasized about it. I want to see what America really is. I want to hang out with people who come from with no education, who come from nowhere, and I want to see what they're thinking. I want to feel what the bottom of the barrel, what reality is like. And I could think of no greater reality than war. I was eager to get to the war, to learn. I wrote the Platoon script in 1976 in New York City in about a few weeks. Primarily because I reached a place in my life where I felt like if I didn't write it at that point in time, I would forget what had happened in the war.
Here was a script that was the most fantastic writing I had come across. It had captured the essence of war from the viewpoint of the foot soldier, and I felt that I had something very special. I went back to all the studios that Oliver had been at, and every one of them rejected the film. That was the first hurdle that we had to get Platoon made.
There's nothing Oliver wouldn't do to get this movie made. And all of a sudden you want to get on that, you want to be part of that show.
I met this guy by the name of Oliver Stone, and the thing that I remember was that he was unlike any guy that I ever met before, as far as he was not like someone that someone would give a bunch of money to make a movie.
When I smoke, I think of Platoon. The film is based on people that I knew in two different infantry outfits over there. I was in the 1st Cavalry, and I was also in the 25th Infantry. So it's the platoon that was drawn in the movie is based on composites and groups of people that I met in different units. The characters in the film, they're accurate. I mean, that's the platoon. The platoon is made up of men, and each one has an individual characteristics. Each one comes from different states, different feelings. I was very comfortable with the cast because I knew that I had, like a baseball coach with a great team, I just knew that I had platoons of different layers of players, and I knew that all these kids were hot.
Nobody had done anything. Tom had done a couple movies. Willem had done a few. Charlie had done squat.
It was pretty magical. I mean, the fact that he chose who he chose.
Heard about the project when I was 18 for the first time. I went on tape. They sent it to Oliver, and he looked at it and got back to us and said that I was too mannered. I don't know, predictable in my gestures, or that I didn't internalize enough of the audition. So I said, okay, this one goes away, and that's that. Oliver got it back on its feet a couple years later, and met me again, not to audition, but just to talk, and then a couple days after that, I got the gig. And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it, you know?
Tom Berenger was really a little bit of a bland, sentimental TV hero prior to, but he was excellent in The Big Chill. And I thought had an edge. I felt like he could push the limit and go evil, go sour.
He told me a story about the real Barnes. They were going down a jungle path somewhere out there on the Cambodian border, just walking along, maintaining, silence. The Barnes character put his hand up to stop, and they came on 3 of the gooks sitting there. I go, well, how did he know? And he said he smelled them. He could smell them.
It's based on people I know. So what you look for is some matching spirit that resembles. You can't go for facial. I could never find Elias Indian, but it was the same kind of rebellious and defiant spirit I felt that. And Willem had never done that because he'd always been the bad guy. But in The Bad Guy, Streets of Fire, for example, he'd been in that movie. He was really on.
He talked about Elias being an Indian, and that was very important to him. And the curious thing was he was able to project that onto me.
With McGinley, I felt like he's a highly energetic guy, strong, Irish, control. It seemed that I would do the opposite with him, that I would make him an amoral man, a man who was a coward, physical coward too, and a bully. So it was, but he didn't resemble at all the real Sergeant O'Neill who used to hound me and drove me crazy.
Well, I was casting it when it was set to go in 1984, the spring of 84, when I got out of NYU grad. And then the whole thing was scuttled. 2 years later, Oliver calls and says, McGinley, do you want to be in Platoon again? And I'm like, yeah, yes, but I'm doing, Hamlet at the Public. And he goes, tell Joe Pep it's my movie, he'll understand.
Oh, Johnny, I could tell a mile away. I said, you're going to be a star. There's just absolutely no question about it. You got a great face. You're unbelievably handsome, and you have an original character. You have a quality.
He said, read for this part, and I read for the part, and he said, all right. Right then and there, he said, all right, I'm going to need you for, about 13 weeks. We're going to be in the jungle. It's going to be awful conditions. Are you ready to do that? And I said, oh, yes, absolutely. And I said, we're going to the Philippines. And I'd never been out of the country before.
What happened was I came and I auditioned, and then every day he would tell me I'm getting better or something, When I would leave, he'd lean out the window and yell and down there and say, something better, bring me something better tomorrow. It's actually kind of psychotic.
It was a very odd soup bowl of guys, It's a strange mixture.
The only way we were going to get these Wee Willie Winky, the actor, to have any concept of what it was like to be an infantryman in the jungle, was to put them in the jungle as infantrymen.
We made it clear up front before they left the United States that we were not interested in them working on this film unless they were willing to undergo 2 weeks of rehearsal as training as light infantry. And that was the condition.
Hypothetically, if you broke your leg, you wouldn't be allowed to do the film. 3 actors in New York tried to start a movement that would prevent that language from being in the contract. And I'm like, Oliver, and he's like, you're not with these guys, are you? And I'm like, I almost started crying. I'm like, Oliver, no, I am going to the Philippines. I'm so going. I'm already there.
Nobody was around because I wanted to go there early just to relax and get used to the surroundings. I was really tired, and I said, I can't go to sleep now. It'll totally throw me off, but I can set an alarm. I'll take a little nap. Alarm woke me up, and I went to open up the curtains, to see, whether it was still sunny out and all that. And I looked, and there was a column of tanks going down on the street. The revolution had started while I was taking my nap.
What happens now? There's a revolution in the Philippines. This is what else,
Everybody was saying, listen, don't go to the Philippines, don't do that. It's very dangerous, because that entire, the NPA, the New People's Army was there, and it was just chaos, and, riots and murders and bombs and shit everywhere.
Selfishly, all I could think about was I wish these bastards would get the revolution over so we could make our little $6 million movie.
We landed there, I think it was 2 days after Marcos had split.
From the moment those lads arrived in the Philippines where we shot it, they were their characters. They were new guys coming into a unit in Vietnam. Nothing else existed. He wanted them to understand the pain and the agony and the angst and the psychology of being a grunt in Vietnam. One of the first things I did was a shocker. I cut all their hair off. I stood right in front of them and looked in their beady ass eyeballs and said, get that civilian slime off of your gourd. And that shit was gone. And with it went their persona, whoever they thought they were. They were now a soldier.
48 hours earlier, I was in New York City, getting a cup of coffee and a bagel, and now these idiots are looking at me for what to do. I'm hardly prepared to tell you.
Gentlemen, that piece of equipment that looks like a little tiny shovel, that's what it is. It's called an entrenching tool. Now you pick it up and you take it out of your character and you go here, 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 and here, and you spend the next 4 hours digging your home. And they started in on the holes.
Our hands are just raw because we're not used to this kind of work. We're a bunch of city guys out in the bush.
On that same night, I had the special effects guy, Yves de Bono, came out, and while they were digging their home, he quietly put in some explosive charges around the perimeter. And I gave the signal. Boom, 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 boom. These mortar explosions went off all around them, and we got up and screamed, incoming, incoming, get in your holes. And then the AK-47 fire started from outside the perimeter and just started pouring in. These guys were just crapping little green pellets.
Special Forces guys were also pretty hardcore. I mean, there was some question about whether they knew the boundaries of the game.
I don't think any of us, myself included, really knew the extent of what that boot camp would become.
And it was all sorts of things. It was cooking. It was slang of the period. It was music of the period. It was weapons, booby traps, small infantry tactics, defensive and offensive tactics, ambushes, first aid, medevac, radio communications.
All your time was occupied with something, either a lecture or a demonstration about some weapon or some type of ordnance or whatever, some equipment that you had to wear.
We were doing basic infantry and advanced infantry training things in 2-week period that's ordinarily done in 9, 10, 12, 13, 14 weeks.
It was rigorous, rugged, tough, designed that way.
Everybody had to follow their rank, was only spoken to as their character name. It was very regimented. It was very exhausting.
2 weeks is not a long time, but you gotta jam it all in.
We didn't shower. We didn't bathe. We didn't have any access to those facilities because of the grime and the bites and the mung and the stonosity of it all. I decided to scratch blood from my body, and that physically had to stop me.
The rations, that we were given to eat was the most shocking thing that you'd ever seen. It would be like bean component, I think was the name of one of them, bean component, turkey loaf. But I'd have eaten my socks at that point, we were all starving to death.
I lost 28 pounds in 2 weeks.
You couldn't shit, so for 4 or 5 days you couldn't take a shit, and then finally you do, and it's just nirvana. Then my biggest fear was that while you're taking a shit, a cobra was going to crawl up your ass and eat your colon.
We got up, I filled my canteen up, I put these pills in that, purify the water, supposedly. Shook it up. We walk about 50 yards upstream from where we were. I collected the water downstream, remember. There was a big, fat, dead pig in the water, all bloated and, really disgusting. I drank the water that just ran over that thing. We got back. I was delirious for like 24 hours. I don't remember it. I got a little taste of like jungle fever.
It was 50% alert every night. You were up for 2 hours, and then you woke your buddy, and he was up for 2 hours.
That was the one thing I told Dale By up front. I said, I want them to know what a year without sleep feels like. I want them to feel it in 2 weeks.
Okay, you say you're playing army and all that, but there's enough real danger and enough peer pressure that the stakes somehow got very, very high.
Well, one night I'm sleeping, and I sleep with my mouth open, like this, and he takes a water bug, which is a huge cockroach. Took 2 of them, and they were copulating, and he put it on my beard, and I like this, and then the thing crawled into my mouth, and it crawled in my tongue, and I spit it out, and in what was pretty dim light, I could see 2 water bugs copulating on my lap.
They began to snap at each other. They began to say, "You son of a bitch, that's my sea ration," and you could hear this going on. And I knew then that we were beginning to build a real life.
At the end of that 2 weeks, we took 2 hours out, we all went up, we did a mass reading of it. And it was fascinating hearing all the characters, because it was all gelling in my mind, and it was like, indeed, all these guys were becoming the characters.
These kids were ready to go, and I was very, very proud.
We went directly from our graduation party to the first day of shooting. Oliver didn't want any downtime back in Manila at the hotel, this and that, for anybody to lose that edge.
It was 0400 when we got on the little buses they had, and we went directly location. We got all our gear on, and then we marched up the hill. And it was quite a march, actually. Probably a good mile or so uphill. And all you could hear were the feet. That's all you could hear. Nobody was talking as the sun was coming up. And as we would march by, we saw Oliver go by in a Jeep. He goes by in a Jeep like that, and we all looked. Reminded me of the story, my dad was in the Philippines in World War II, and he saw MacArthur drive by in a Jeep with that corncob pipe. And he says, "What an asshole. What an asshole."
I thought he was a madman. One of those guys who sort of rides that fine line between brilliance and explosion of the brain.
He would find ways to get inside you. The more he got to know you, the better access he had to your buttons. And he started pushing him a little bit.
I think one scene he got pissed at me. I made the helicopter land, and I made him run up and get the resupply, and he wanted to wear a T-shirt or something. because there was the dirt and the rocks hitting his back. And I said, bullshit, take your t-shirt off. I want your, skin.
I said, look, Ollie, if I wear my t-shirt behind the tattoo, the chopper's kicking up rocks and pebbles at 100 miles an hour. I'm getting beat to shit out here. And he says, what are you, a pussy? Little pussy from Malibu playing too much volleyball on the beach, huh? The f***'s wrong with you? Can't handle some pebbles? Put some dirt in your tattoo. That was early on. That was like, I think, day 4. So I knew what I was going to be dealing with.
Everyone hated him so much it was embarrassing. But he wanted it that way.
He'll stop at nothing. You'd hate him in the moment. You'd hate him. But that would take you to the next level, and the next level, and the next level. You know what I mean? He just took you on that ride.
You know, a good director is a guy that creates a certain tone and creates the world, and you can be in that world. And then all he has to do is steer you.
Get him, Mark! Come on, Mark! Come on, Mark! Get him! Piece of shit! Get him, Mark! Fucking hell! Get him! Break it up! Break it up! Action!
He made this like really it was a life or death thing. There's real talent in that.
You want me to hold onto a chair? I didn't have a seatbelt on.
Yeah?
And mid-flight, the chair gets way. So King grabbed me from behind.
So you almost went out the thing?
Well, it was close, but I'm still here.
It's a good thing you're here. Otherwise, we wouldn't have a movie.
Hey, I put a seatbelt on this time.
Oliver.
That was a rut.
That's
That was a rut. How did you get on?
Good. You felt better.
Oh, man.
What happened, Oliver?
What happened?
Yeah.
Having problems. It's hard.
With what?
It's hard.
I guess you could say it's a method direction in the sense of wanting them to realize that the stakes were high, that their lives were on the line.
I was completely knocked out for about 10 seconds. And I woke up to Dale dying with a little pen light in my eyes, checking my pupils, and it was very strange. I was not back in Kansas, however. I was still in the jungle.
I remember the 42nd day, I have this vivid memory of my going out to this night shoot and feeling like I was alone. I think my Bob Richardson showed up and a few other people, but we were down to nothing.
It was absolutely, totally guerrilla filmmaking. It was like, knock this shot off over here, run over here, do this,
Bravo 2.
We all helped move equipment. You never see an actor do that. You saw these actors do that. They were used to humping heavy things, and they were into this. They wanted to do this. And anything they could do to help out, they did.
One day we did 55 setups. And how did we like some of that stuff? I don't know.
I said, how do you see this? I mean, do you see me? Is it very internal? Is it external? I mean, what's going on here? Am I looking at him? Am I looking away? I mean, what's going on? Oliver didn't say a word. He just stared at me. In a very serious, focused, deadly, I just might kill you any second type of stare. And I didn't figure it out first. Then it hit me. That was the performance he wanted, was that stare, that look, that thing.
You go off like that, and you just start blinking like that, And you realize that he wasn't there anymore. He was somewhere else.
The eye of our rage, our Captain Ahab.
I was first in the village, and there's a spider hole covered up with a basket. Open it up, we find it. The response of Dale and Oliver on that scene was, I turned around and walked away. Print. I didn't say anything. I think they had a flashback on that one. There were a couple scenes like that.
Why didn't you listen to me, huh? Why? Why didn't you listen to me? Stupid? You stupid asshole? Get
I lose it. Basically, snap. It was an audible snap. And have to make the one-legged kid dance. And so the poor kid that they got he had one of those milk things going on with his pupil. He was blind in one eye, and he was retarded completely. And he really only had one leg. And they weren't treating him that well, and they were asking him to do things he couldn't really do. The guy with two legs I had trouble with. It was very disturbing. I didn't enjoy that at all. And as I was doing it, I got good peripherals, so I could see Oliver over on the side. I could really see him going back. I was convinced that he was back. It was the whole feeling you got from him watching us and me, sneakily observing him. It was an interesting character study in his world, how it affected him. Some of the things that I was doing that I knew he had done.
I never saw a My Lai massacre, which is what happened with one unit in the American infantry, destroyed 120, 130 people in one afternoon, deliberately.
Let's go for it. Let's do the whole village. Come on, Such, what the are we waiting for?
I saw much more random patterns of killing, and it bothered me. I understand it. I understand why people do that under the pressure of war. Many Americans felt the villagers were against this. Certainly, villagers were getting their fair amount of pressure from the North Vietnamese. But also, ideologically, the villagers were really on the North Vietnamese side, because the way they saw it, they were fighting for their freedom. We uprooted them. We bombed the territory. We destroyed their infrastructure. We destroyed their shrines. We destroyed their temples. We didn't understand their Buddhism or their ancestor worship. So we really alienated the countryside, and I tried to show this a bit in the movie, where the villagers are very upset with what we've done to them. At the same time, the Americans are very upset at the villagers because of the feeling that they're storing the rice or storing the weapons for the North Vietnamese. So this leads inevitably to a conflict.
Women screaming at you, and the men saying nothing, and you just, it's 110 degrees and you got your pot on and you're like, your head's ready to explode. And this is when he goes over the edge.
To deny that it happened, which is what some critics of the film say, is to deny the reality of Vietnam. Also, what was happening was that there was a tremendous amount of fragging incidents where American soldiers would kill other American soldiers or attempt to kill, which started to happen when the morale of the troops started to go down, when Lyndon Johnson announced that the war was over, that he was pulling out from the presidency. We knew we were never there to win. We were there simply to survive as individuals.
I think Elias's smile is relief. I mean, all of a sudden the adrenaline's gone out. I mean, he thought he was out there alone, and he's nailed a bunch of guys, but he could very well have got killed. He could very well have been left back there.
It was like a recognition. He was a very fatalistic guy, and it was like, okay, this is the way it's going to come, and it's my time, and you're going to do it. Fancy that. That's a good one.
Well, I think you can entertain both. They're not contradictory. And his levitation, his ability to transcend his mortal body, is what motivates the smile. And I think that probably Berenger sees it in a whole different. He just is a practical man who doesn't have much respect for the spiritual life.
He was reconciled to his death. That's why he could do something as crazy as he did. And that also makes it equally hard when he decides to go for the helicopter after all. I've got all these technical considerations. I got to avoid that. I got to get around that. I got to pass through here. Then I got to blow this off. Then these guys are here. I've got to cue the whole shot. It's this massive shot. Everything gets activated by me saying, "I'm ready," and I'm totally alone. I'm a guy in the middle of nowhere with this walkie-talkie, ready to activate this huge shot. It was very exciting.
I think he's feeling incredible guilt. There's that shot of him on the helicopter with Lieutenant Wolf looking at him like, "What the hell? You told me he was dead." And a couple of the other guys going, "You said he was dead." He comes in there to say he's sorry, but how can he ever say those words?
I didn't look at it as killing Barnes as much as I looked at it as releasing Barnes from Barnes. This may sound crazy, but a gesture of peace and an act of violence to release his soul.
These boys were returned old and fractured souls. A part of them was dead forever. And this is what I tried to show at the end with Charlie Sheen, going back to his country. He would never be the same man again. He would in fact have the soul of a murderer. He had killed.
I said, I'm going to kiss the ground at LAX. And I did. I kissed the ground. I didn't think I was going to make it out of there alive at one point.
Some of those kids got picked off in the sense that they, this was their first film, and it's a hard place to follow. And they would, go back to jobs as waiters or hoping for the next film. Some of them never got that second film, ever. Some of them just went back to hometowns. And, it was a bit like Vietnam. We all kind of fell apart, and some guys did better. Others. So each one went his own way, and it's sort of sad to see that. It's like, life moves on. It doesn't stop. That's the point.
This was important to us from the get-go, because it was important to Dale Dye. It was important to Oliver. We took their lead, and also with very good material in this incredible, we, in our simple way, as much as possible, we were trying to be committed to, it goes beyond realism. It has to do with it being the right spirit.
I asked him, I said, Oliver, look, I'm going to Las Vegas to meet with the surviving guys from my outfit in Vietnam, to a sort of a reunion. Now, these guys are the real deal. They have seen the elephant, heard the owl. I think we should see what they think. And he said, oh, it's not ready, and we don't have the sound, and we don't have the music laid in, and yada, yada. And I said, Oliver, they don't care. I said, let's just test the waters.
It serves, I think, as Oliver's own tribute, because he himself was a combat infantryman in Vietnam. It serves as his tribute and his statement about those things which happened to us in the war.
Even if the public ignored it, we had done something special.
The country is critics, the newspaper guys are critics, the world are critics. Then you get it down to the vets. The vets are your best critics. But then you specifically get it down one more step to the guys who are in the same platoon, and they're looking to see which character they are. And I would imagine it makes him a little bit nervous.
Larry, I said, what flavor? And you said something like, that's pretty good. We would always have these verbal sparring accidents.
Struck a lot of nerves because a lot of people say, well, yeah, I went through that. This is what I went through, but I have never been able to express myself and talk to my family or to my kids or to my buddies about what actually went on, because it's just been a part of my life that I didn't want to talk about. And boom, here's this film Platoon that says, yeah, I went through that. That's my experience.
When we got home, Top Gun was the big hit. And, we really, by the end of that Platoon, it felt like we'd made a love story about young men dying in war. I mean, that's what it felt like. It was like this wildly terrific bonding experience. And you get home and it's like, aircraft carriers and guns and stuff. And it's like, shit, that's not what we did. And that's what people are going to see as a war movie. And then it turns out Oliver's going to release it at Christmas. And I'm like, oh, we're in the ass. This is not, It's a Wonderful Life. So I just figured we're dead meat.
I knew we were making a very important film. I knew that the vets would appreciate it and the families would appreciate it. I didn't know that this film was going to be received like it was, and that was a real shock for me.
I thought we were going to make a movie with a lot of integrity and a very smart movie, but I thought it would be misidentified, and the people did not want to hear about Vietnam.
Platoon was hailed by viewers and critics alike. It has been a phenomenal cultural as well as box office success.
The whole response to Platoon changed my life as a filmmaker, because until that time, I never realized the power of a motion picture, that you can affect social change. You can change people's thinking about subjects.
I can remember the days when I wouldn't even admit that I was a Vietnam veteran. But now, and I'm sure this movie has a lot to do with it, I can finally say I'm very proud to be a Vietnam veteran.
I hope the one thing they walk away with from this film is the truth, and knowing that that this film is about the horrors, the madness.
It's a mythological movie, man, and he understood that, I think, Oliver.
I look back on it as a very gratifying experience. It was a real labor of love.
In my heart, and I think we all felt we were doing something special. And the idea was more important than any single one of us.